Welcome to Barcelona. I'm Martin Haven, and alongside me in a moment we'll be joined by Gareth Rees. Welcome to the qualifying sessions for this third round of the FIA Formula 3000 Championship. Well, Justin Wilson, the winner of the opening race of the championship, in form right from the word go in Barcelona. The first 45-minute session was seeing him going flying to the top of the timesheets. Mario Haberfeld, the Supernova driver, after 8 minutes finding himself out in the gravel traps. He was second fastest at that stage, but would obviously have little chance to improve in the first session.
Yeah, I think the car was good. We only did like 3 quick laps because the first ones were just to warm up the tires, and we were improving every lap. I'm confident on the lap I spun we could have improved again, but it's one of those things. I mean, if you're pushing hard, sometimes you go a bit over the limit, and I think that lap was a bit quicker again. Just tried to go earlier on the power, but it didn't work. The car went sideways and I spun off, but we were lucky we still finished second this session. On the other hand, we still have 2 sets of tires for the next session, and let's hope the conditions are the same, and then my car should be good again.
Well, it seemed that the track was a little low grip, and Haberfeld one of those who found that out, helping the mechanics by cleaning out the dirt and giving it a good hoover in the under tray. And all this gravel just gets everywhere. Well, moments later, the other Supernova driver was in trouble, Mark Webber. He'd set only 13th fastest time by the stage. He lost control of his car exiting the final turn, and it bit him back. 2 wheels on the grass, or even 1 wheel on the grass. The car spun across and hit the pit wall firmly. Webber was clearly unharmed and out of the car, but there would be plenty of work for the Supernova team to do. Wide and onto the grass, everything locked up, nearly came back to him. But in the end, a heavily damaged Supernova chassis was the result.
I got behind the curb and made a mistake. I was a bit frustrated because on the first 5 laps I just couldn't get a clear lap anywhere, and very frustrating to not use the fresh rubber as I should have done, and that caught up with me. And then trying to improve the car a bit there, I made a mistake in the barrier.
Honest as ever, the session stopped, and that was probably the saving of Mark Webber's weekend. The Supernova team would get the car back during the session and start repairs, hoping to get him back out for the second period.
I'd say we're going to push hard. We're going to maybe have 10 minutes, if we're lucky, maybe 5 minutes, 3 laps in the second session, but it's not easy at the moment, but made a mistake.
Bas Leinders, the Belgian driver in the KTR machine, third fastest, 1:34.426, but half a second behind the poleman Justin Wilson. Leinders still looking at probably his best grid position for several seasons. The European Minardi driver really seeming to get hooked up. A lot of the drivers had complained that the track was dirty and in patches oily, and hopefully the progress of the Formula 1 cars will have helped cure that before the race. David Saelens, another Belgian, on the second row of the grid. So with Leinders and Saelens in the European Minardi cars alongside, it's an all-Belgian second row. At this stage, 5th fastest was the Czech, Tomáš Enge, in the second Nordic Racing entry. And Chris and Derek Mower, who run the Nordic Racing team, with 1 victory so far this season and 2 very promising finishes from Enge as well. Must be hoping that things are only going to continue to improve. This is already surely their strongest showing in Formula 3000 to date. Enge and Justin Wilson, clearly 2 very similar drivers, aren't even remotely phased when the car starts moving around on them, and I'm sure that is among the factors that is helping Nordic this year. 2 drivers both pulling in the same direction on setup is enormously useful to a team. If one likes a smooth understeering car and the other one wants to throw it at the corners, then you always end up with confusing feedback. So after the first session then, this is the way it stood. Wilson from Haberfeld, the 2 Belgians on row 2, Enge and Pizzonia from Friesacher and Darren Manning, Antônio Garcia and Giorgio Pantano, the reigning German Formula 3 champion, in 10th place, and in 13th spot Mark Webber, with the team already working hard on his car. The question was, would they beat the clock? and get Webber out for the second session. If it were quicker, then that would be very important indeed for Webber. Not only a chance for him possibly to improve, but more importantly, to try and not get pushed too far further down the order. Just 22 cars in Barcelona, incidentally. The Kid Jensen Racing stroke Monaco Motorsport team unable to make the race. They cited a force majeure reason. And as the second session got underway, cars being led out by Justin Wilson, the man who was on top of the timesheets. Mark Webber already in his Supernova chassis as the team started to rebuild the destroyed back end. And eventually all that effort was to pay off. Webber back out on track in the final 10 minutes of the session. Obviously the car was unlikely to be absolutely pucker, certainly straight and safe, but the question is whether the setup would have been spot on. Perhaps more important to get Webber out onto the track rather than go for those final tiny little details in the setup. And on his first lap out of the pits, undoubtedly the Australian would have been pushing very hard indeed to try and find out what the car was capable of. In the end, 11th was the best that he could manage. 2 spots higher up than he'd been when he crashed, so a definite improvement, and in the top dozen, where perhaps a podium finish is still relatively on the cards.
The guys did an unbelievable job. Obviously it's not put together how we would put together after a few hours in the workshop, but it was nice to be a few rows further up with what we had there, but we only used 2 sets as well. We couldn't get on the 3rd set in time, so considering what was against us after my mistake, the guys did a good job, and I made it hard for us. So, you know, that can happen in this tight periods in qualifying, and I will look forward to the race tomorrow and try and get some points.
Giorgio Pantano in the Astromega car, 10th fastest, finishing his session a little early. The reason, I think you'll guess from that, one of a number of high-speed offs. The Campsa corner, which is a pretty high-speed right-hander, claimed a number, and the final corner as well, which is a pretty high-speed right-hander. Well, Pantano was wobbling on the way in there and was never really going to make that, was he? 9th fastest, one of the Spirafico twins. This is Rodrigo. No, it's not, it's Ricardo, the Petrobras junior driver. So much for my notes then, saying that it was the Coloni driving younger or older. Is it Rodrigo? Ricardo, of course, the reigning Italian Formula 3000 champion. And it's down the bottom end of the grid for the other Petrobras car as well. Antônio Pizzonia, the reigning British Formula 3 champion, 8th fastest time. He was 7th until the dying moments when Patrick Friesacher once more eased ahead of him. They'd had a bit of a squabble at the bottom end of the top half dozen throughout both sessions, and in the end it was the Red Bull junior driver from Austria who managed to keep his nose in front. They were outside the top half dozen though. Outside of row 3 will be Darren Manning, 3 spots further back than Imola, and hopefully using a little less grass as he goes down to the first corner. Let's hear what he thought.
Yeah, definitely we can race from 6th place and hopefully get on the podium and maybe challenge for the win. You never know here with the starts. It tends to be quite chaotic and quite a lot of overtaking happens. So from 6th place, get a good start and hopefully pass a few and start challenging on the opening laps, and yeah, it should be all right.
Well, we've seen Barcelona Formula 3000 races in the last couple of years throw up some fairly bizarre results, and he's absolutely right. Anything could happen here. 5th fastest was the Belgian David Saelens. After the first session, he was on the 2nd row of the grid. He will start from inside row 3. I was pretty sure he said that I could have stayed in the top 3, but it's always easy to say that afterwards. I was sure of this or I was sure of that. But he said, I'm pretty happy with the car. It's very consistent in terms of lap times, and that's good for the race. I had 3 laps with 3 sets of tyres, and on the second set we really didn't do very well because the track still hadn't come in by that stage, he says. And on the final set, I got to the end of the straight and there was a lot of gravel all over the track, so I got onto the brakes, but when you're doing 300 Ks and try to brake in 80 metres, stones don't really help. So he said I was pretty lucky to avoid the gravel trap there, and that was the end of my session. Well, Mario Haberfeld, fourth fastest, back out on track despite having tasted gravel earlier in the session, and indeed having gone off in the first session as well.
What happened last year is something happened in Barcelona, but it could have happened anywhere where the dust could come up. So I wasn't really worried that racing here because of that. Of course, it doesn't bring good memories, but I think now that's over, and from here we'll just go forward.
Well, Haberfeld fully recovered and back to strength after that incident out of the final corner in qualifying last year. He missed 3 races because of the injury, which cut the muscles in his thigh down to the bone, but he fortunately managed to come back as strong as ever. Bas Leinders, third fastest, the best qualifying session for the Belgian for a long while. Very long time since I've had a good starting position as this, he says. In fact, I think it was in a Formula 3 race in Germany in 1998. Blimey, that's some admission. From the Belgian to the Czech, outside of the front row of the grid with a defiant lap in the closing stages of the second session, Thomas Enge, who was on the podium last time out, looking to do better than that this time, and it's an all-Nordic front row because Justin Wilson, who banged in a pole position time very early on in the first session, improved on it in the second to stay ahead of the opposition. The first ever Nordic front row headed up by Justin Wilson.
It's good for the team and also for the championship. It's going to help because it's a lot nicer having somebody you trust alongside you than somebody you don't. So it's going to be a lot better feeling going into the first corner, but still we both need to get a good start and have a talk between us and make sure we don't do anything silly or make a mistake and, you know, take away all that we've done in qualifying.
The strategy will be not to kick each other in first corner or nowhere and I try to do a good start and I try to win tomorrow.
And interestingly enough, you'll be able to see both of them in Monday and Tuesday's action as well on the Eurosport Super Racing weekends, because Wilson and Enge, courtesy of their Coca-Cola sponsors, will also be racing at Magny-Cours in the Coca-Cola sponsored 911 GT3Rs in the NGT race. So a very busy 4 days for Wilson and Enge, but first of all, of course, they have to concentrate on this afternoon's Formula 3000 race, and 35 laps of the Barcelona circuit await them. The cars just about to come out onto the grid. Well, there you see the full qualifying lineup.
Bueno, no os mováis de ahí, no cambiéis de canal, que después de la publicidad llega la carrera en directo. Espero que os guste. Hasta luego.
And Antonio Garcia says we're about to take a commercial break. Stay with us for the race. And he just remembered to add in that extra little word, live, right after this. Antonio Garcia will start in 13th position. Justin Wilson from Britain starts on pole. Welcome to Barcelona, live for round 3 of the FIA Formula 3000 International Championship. Good afternoon, my name is Martin Haven. Alongside me, very glad to welcome back Gareth Rees. Gareth, Barcelona, hot, dry, sunny, not really that different from what we've seen in terms of conditions from Brazil or from Imola, but this is a bit of a dusty, bit of a slippery racetrack. We've seen plenty of action in previous years.
Yeah, it's a circuit the drivers know well and also like a lot. I mean, it's a good challenging circuit with a good variety of corners, but quite a bit of testing's done here. They haven't tested here this year on official testing, but a lot of teams go there over winter and do their winter testing there, so most of the drivers know it very well, and it's quite a popular place, and certainly when I drove, I really enjoyed it, particularly the fast corners. Nowadays, circuits don't seem to have so many fast corners, and it makes a nice change to come here and have 4 or 5.
Now, Justin Wilson and Thomas Enge on the front row of the grid. Justin Wilson already winner in Brazil for Nordic Racing. Thomas Enge on the podium last time out at Imola as well. The team has been one of the sort of midfield teams, I think it's fair to say, for most of its career. Right now, though, they are pretty much the benchmark team in 3000. I mean, that's a big turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 key points. First of all, this year they've got good finance behind them for the first time ever, really, with Coca-Cola. and that obviously allows the team to do a better job with more at their disposal. Second of all, obviously both drivers are very good drivers. I mean, Justin, I don't believe Justin gets the recognition he deserves in the UK. It's often the case that certain drivers seem to have good PR companies and get good recognition. Justin doesn't have a good PR company. What he has is talent, and it's about time that magazines and newspapers started recognising that and giving him the recognition he deserves. I mean, his achievements now probably exceed, for example, what David Coulthard achieved in 3000. And yet, when David was in 3000, the publicity he had around him was an awful lot more than Justin receives. Also, Enge's a very good driver. He's been at the front of 3000 for the last two seasons or so, and with that pairing and that money behind them, then they can do a good job.
Both pretty similar in styles as well. They're certainly not smooth above all drivers. They both like to move the car around, and they don't mind if it slides around. And again, I think that's possibly helping the team because they've got two drivers who like the same setup, and I'm sure when you've got limited time, as they do in 3000, that really must be an advantage as well.
Yeah, I think both drivers are not... If one was a first-year driver, that would be different, because both are second- or third-year drivers, actually, aren't they? Third-year drivers. That helps. They know the circuits well, they know the cars well, they're just able to get on with the job. That's the important thing.
Two of the most experienced and, in fact, two of the older drivers in the field as well. Thomas Enge, really one of the older. Just Bas Leinders and Darren Manning, older than him on the grid. But we've got, as you say, a number of drivers here who are already linked to Formula One teams, who haven't won races in this category and who haven't been front runners in this category. And yet Justin Wilson, who has done both over the last 3 years, has not really had much of a sniff of an inside of a Formula One cockpit. And I agree with you. I think it is largely to do with the amount, the head of steam of publicity that you get sort of boiling up behind you. Well, second row of the grid, Bas Leinders and Mario Haberfeld. No, that's not quite right, is it? Bas Leinders and David Saelens, the two Belgian drivers. And we should expect, I think, to see some interesting results from the pair of them. Looking further down the order, this is Darren Manning. Darren starting on the outside of the third row of the grid. Now, he had a pretty good race in Imola, but couldn't really quite seem to find an answer to the pace of Mark Webber. Patrick Friesacher down in 7th spot, the Austrian, so again, there's a chance that he may well find himself up towards the points. Now, am I right in remembering last year that both the Red Bull cars were in pretty good shape here, and yet both of them ended up being forced into the pits with mechanical problems? So I'm sure that they will hope to try and turn that kind of performance around here. Now, the Petrobras team, like Supernova last year, pretty much in dominant form, yet both of them languishing further down the grid. Pizzonia and Speraffico 8th and 9th only in qualifying, whereas you would certainly have expected them to be within the top half dozen, as you would with both of the Supernova drivers. Webber, just to remind you, in 11th position on the grid. And Mario Haberfeld there you saw in 3rd spot. And Webber, I'm sure, would count himself unlucky not to be there in those first couple of rows of the grid, but that small problem in qualifying that turned into a large problem as he dropped a wheel onto the grass and then destroyed the back end of the car was really mitigating against him. But he was saying, despite that, they were having trouble finding a setup with the car, which is not something you expect to hear normally from Supernova.
No, I think it's probably a case of the circuit being, although they tested heavily over the winter there, the circuit is very different when they come. Obviously, the winter is much cooler, the ambient temperature is much cooler, and there's not so much of a dust problem. Here they've got the F1 rubber to cope with, they've got the dust on the circuit. It's very windy, there's a headwind on the front straight, and all that changes how the car handles.
Well, what Gareth is saying about the dust, very obvious there as you saw the cars pulling away, or in this case some of them not pulling away. You could see clouds of dust coming up. There is Amanda Mikkola being shoved off the line, and in front of him, that would have been Rodrigo. No, it wasn't Rodrigo Speraffico, that was Jamie Malo. No, it was Derek Hill, in fact, 22. So Derek Hill right down there towards... No, it can't be, because Dam's cars aren't blue, are they? They're black. So may well have been Jamie Malo. Whatever, both of them restarted or started up by their teams with slave batteries. And I would think, on my recollection of the way that it works, that they should probably end up starting at the back of the grid. I'm not sure if they're allowed to pass on the warm-up lap. Certainly in Formula One you're not supposed to.
But I think you're supposed to. It seems to be a rule that they either change regularly or don't apply very strongly, one of the two, because you see it quite often, cars take their place.
Absolutely. Unless your name is Schumacher and you happen to be in a bright, obvious red car, then you can pretty much do what you like, and even then sometimes you can. So, weaving to try and work a little bit of temperature into the tyres. As you say, the ambient temperature is pretty reasonable. A little bit of a gusty wind, but the most important problem is going to be the dust on the track, the sand on the track offline. And once drivers start to taste the gravel traps as well, bringing gravel back on, as we heard David Saelens say in qualifying, when you arrive at your braking point, there's nothing left to account for the fact that suddenly you're not braking on nice grippy tarmac, but a big patch of marbles. So the cars on their way round to the starting grid for this third round of the FIA Formula 3000 Championship, led by Justin Wilson. Justin Wilson and Thomas Enge, the Nordic Racing teammates, who dominate the front row of the grid, lead the field round to prepare for the start of this third race in the FIA Formula 3000 Championship. Wilson, the championship leader, by 1 point from Mark Webber, winner of the opening race in Brazil. Webber, winner of the second race in Imola, starts in 11th spot. And I gather that Derek Mower and his son Chris sat for some while after qualifying with Justin Wilson and Thomas Enge, talking about the starts. Of course, the one thing that they will have been worried most of all about is if one of them doesn't quite get away, and that would notably be Wilson, who starts a few yards ahead, as quickly as the other, how they're going to out-fumble the others and yet not take themselves off into the first corner. That will be critical, and I'm sure the very last thing either of them will want to do is to hinder the other to the detriment of the team or themselves. On the grid with the two late starters coming round to form up. There are a couple of spaces on the grid there. Those cars should come into the back of the shot, but the red lights are on without them, so they may have been sent into the pit lane. It's a long hold, away they go. Good start from Justin Wilson. Thomas Enge dives in right behind him immediately. There you go, 1-2, the team formation. Leave the Belgians to sort out row 2 of the grid. Darren Manning is making a move down the outside to try and come around the Belgians. The black car won't make it though, but he's going to have to try and hold off. Oh, around the outside. That is the...
Enge leads. Wilson third.
Wilson's third. Well, that's a bit of a disappointment for Enge. I was watching further back to try and see who was coming up in the medium bottom under the top 6 positions. Justin Wilson beaten by Bas Leinders and Thomas Enge out of the first turn.
He got off the line very strongly, but he didn't seem to capitalise on it, Justin Wilson.
And he was on the right side of the track as well, on the racing line where the good braking was, so he shouldn't have had too much of a problem. Now, was that just simply nerves and driver error, or was there perhaps something else going on in the cockpit? We know that Gabriele Lancieri in the Durango team lost one of his gears during qualifying. He lost third gear, which is pretty much the only gear you absolutely wouldn't want to lose. Oh, and off at the back there has gone, I would think, probably Victor Maslov.
Yeah, I'd say.
Looked like one of the Arden cars. Went off at high speed. And the cameras will probably go back and pick him up in a moment for identification purposes. But for our purposes at the moment, Thomas Enge starting to stretch away, and Justin Wilson will be boiling with fury at himself in third place for having let that one get away. Yes. Mark Webber's made a good start though. It looks like he's up to about 7th position. As they come across the line, Webber, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He is in 7th place in the second Supernova car from 11th on the grid, so that was a good start from him. Haberfeld, his teammate, in 4th. Saelens and then Pizzonia in 6th position. Pizzonia didn't manage to pick up anything away from the start.
Yeah, Justin's just got to settle down now. He would have been annoyed with himself, like you said. He's got to make sure it doesn't affect his thinking. Just settle down, and he's obviously faster than the two guys in front. He was comfortably on pole. So just chip away at it and get the places back. He's got a long race ahead of him.
Well, he spent an awfully long time out on the track in qualifying on Friday. He was out at the very beginning of the first session and stayed out almost all the way through. He set his pole time early on and improved on it in the second session, and then continued to stay out. In fact, he was not only the first car out, but the very last car back in as well. Quite how he managed that, I'm not sure. But he was definitely out there learning about the track on fresh rubber and on used tyres, and really trying to dial himself in, knowing that that pole position was something he was likely to be able to hold on to, just to try and avoid such problems from the head of the field. You can see the order further down. Darren Manning it was who dropped right down the order early on. Darren Manning down in 21st place. So possibly it was Manning that we saw go off. Well, let's have a look again at the start. Justin Wilson on the right gets a good start, but I thought Thomas Enge actually got a better start, and I almost felt there actually. I don't know whether that snap sideways was Wilson snatching second gear with a big bootful, or whether he'd actually got caught by Enge's front wing. But Enge certainly had the run on him and came around the outside of him into the first corner. Enge is now on the right, Wilson on the left, and Enge, well, making sure he had the lead. Justin on the dirty part of the track, and that was his problem, I think, Gareth, not able to brake quite as hard as he'd hoped.
Yeah, not a great start, and not a great first corner, and cost him 2 places.
Well, confusion further back, a couple of other slow starts. Look on the left-hand side, the blue car there in the sort of third 3 abreast row. That's Mark Webber, starting like he had a rocket in the exhaust pipes. Jet-assisted takeoff for the Australian, picked up 3 places away from the grid. So Enge leads by 1.5 seconds from Bas Leinders, Justin Wilson in 3rd, and Mario Haberfeld in 4th, David Saelens, Antonio Pizzonia, Mark Webber, Patrick Friesacher, Giorgio Pantano, and Sébastien Bourdais. And Darren Manning right down at the back. Oh my goodness me, well, we didn't see that early on, did we? And that was Jamie Malo. So right in the middle of the melee, the Brazilian getting himself started and then spinning it round the wrong way, and everybody taking to the grass in avoidance.
So it looks like that was Darren Manning who speared off on the first lap, because
It may well have been.
12th.
We've got him down in, shown still on the timing screens in 21st place, and actually still shown to be lapping. However, his last lap was a 1:41 compared to the leader, who's doing 1:36s. And I don't think Darren was that far off the pace in qualifying. Webber's looking for a move down the inside. We just saw it as they came across the line. Director goes back to Thomas Enge, but Webber was looking for 6th place then. He came across the line right up Antonio Pizzonia's gearbox. Less than 0.3 seconds between them as they came across the line, and he had the toe all the way down. So Webber will be shown still at the end of 3 laps in 7th place. But I wait to see where he is with regard to Antonio Pizzonia, looking to move up into 6th. Well, Thomas Enge, I don't think I have ever seen him drive as neatly and as smoothly as this in his career, Gareth. He is really concentrating 120% now on keeping this car smooth and comfortable, because tyre life mid-race and at the end may well be the critical factor in holding on to this lead that he's building.
Yeah, as you pointed out, he's normally someone who's fairly sideways most of the time, so he's obviously reining it in and he's driving nice and smoothly.
He certainly is. Justin Wilson closing behind now on 2nd placed Bas Leinders, but it's Enge that leads. They really are starting to stretch out now here in the early going at the end of lap 4, or just approaching the end of lap 4 of 35 here in Barcelona. Thomas Enge easing away. He was 1.5 ahead at the line. If that's not nearer 2.5, I will be very surprised. Bas Leinders dropping back, and he's holding up Justin Wilson. Wilson's not yet started to leave nose marks on the back of Leinders' gearbox, but it can't be far away. 4th place still Mario Haberfeld. 5th place still will be David Saelens, I'm sure. But if we get a long shot, let's see what's happened to Mark Webber. No, the director is still staying with the Nordic boys, waiting for a change, a challenge at least for 2nd place.
Haberfeld's going well. Haberfeld's hanging on to the back of the 3 in front of him. He's not getting dropped too badly.
Justin Wilson's last lap, 1:36.230, his fastest of the race to date. So he is certainly quicker than Bas Leinders. Pizzonia still shown in 6th place at the end of the lap. So Mark Webber's lunge on the straight down the inside, obviously parlayed by Pizzonia having the advantage under braking. Webber still there in 7th place. And in fact, he's dropped back a little bit. Just caught a flash of him there in the background. Dropped back a little bit from Pizzonia. Here they come, Pizzonia and Webber, well, 2 or 3 car lengths back. And Webber has got Patrick Friesacher's Red Bull car for company as well, very close behind him. Well, the Belgian in second place. And I'm sure, like Thomas Enge at the moment, he will be concentrating on staying as smooth and as close to the perfect racing line as possible to try and give Justin Wilson as little hope as possible of catching up on him. And Leinders, well, his best grid starting position since 1998, he reckons, since a German Formula 3 race. And looking for his best position in the results in Formula 3000.
Yeah, he's somebody who was very strong in the junior Formula Ford and Vauxhall Lotus and Formula 3, but hasn't ever quite transferred that into 3000.
Well, I wonder again whether it's that thing of the style of the driver not quite suiting what is allowed or required by the cars. Just don't seem to be able to set these things up as inch perfectly as a Formula 3 car. They tend to move around a bit more. So the big place, of course, for passing here at Barcelona, the end of the straight. But Gareth, we've seen some over-ambitious attempts at various other little hairpin corners, but there are a couple of other places. So Wilson shouldn't find himself bottled up for too long if he can get right onto the tail of Bas Leinders.
Yeah, the difficulty is most of the overtaken places are preceded by a fast corner onto the preceding straight. So to get close enough, you have to be very close to the car in front, and the problem you have then is you get in the dirty air created by that car, and it makes your car very unstable, and you end up having to drop back, which means you're not close enough. So it's very difficult to actually get close enough, stay close enough to make the move on the following corner, and that's what Justin's having now. I think he does look probably slightly quicker than Leinders, but as soon as he gets close enough, you can see there his car was just moving slightly in the corner. That's the problem he's up against.
Well, the problem with that is twofold, isn't it? Because not only is it meaning that he's having trouble making it round the corner, but the other thing is that while Bas Leinders' tyres are working well, his are going to start to work less well as he uses them a little bit more.
Yeah, as they get hotter, as he's sliding around more, they get hotter, which makes them more efficient. But he's just basically got to make himself big in Leinders' mirrors and just put the pressure on.
Well, big group here towards the back. These are the tail enders, and the Coloni shooting down the inside. Now that was an absolutely copybook move there. To pick up, let me see if I can work it out from the timing screen. Yes, that was Fabrizio Golin going for 18th place from Jochen Matthias. So there's a big group of them, in fact, now headed by Golin, but going from 18th all the way down to 24th place, where Ananda Mikkola is. So those two cars that didn't start on the warm-up lap have started at the back, and they were both held at the back by the officials. And there's one of the typical sights at that downhill left-hander at Seat, locking the wheel there. The inside wheel is unladen as they break deep into the corner and turn in. It's a pretty wide-looking approach, and it always seems to induce a bit of lock-up there. And that's something else that the tyres won't like over the course of the next 30-odd laps.
It's very bumpy there as well, that corner. As you brake, it's a combination of things. As you brake, it's very bumpy, which makes the car jump up, which makes the brakes grab on. But also you're turning in as well and unloading the weight from the left front corner, so that helps it go light, which means braking, locking up there is very easily, and you've got to like this, you've got to avoid it to look after your tyres.
Well, this is the other overtaking opportunity. La Heza. Apologies to all Spaniards who just cringed at that, but that's the corner 10. Again, a downhill left-hander with a sort of much wider exit there, so a variety of lines are sort of supportable. Back to our top three. Webber still stuck in 7th place, and last time round, well, 0.6 of a second behind Pizzonia, which is pretty much where Justin is now, behind second place Bas Leinders, which is close enough to be infuriatingly close and not quite close enough to actually do anything about it. But he does close very strongly down there, doesn't he? That's turn 5 Seat again coming up, and down into 6 and 7, the two left-handers, and then the little right-hand Jink up to this next right-hander, Kampser. This looks to be a pretty quick place to go off, and we saw a few go off there in qualifying. kind of over the brow, almost off-camber-ish feel to it, I think.
Yeah, it's a blind corner, so it's not easy. But really, you want to try and carry speed through there if you're racing, because there is a half chance of overtaking on the following corner. But as I said before, as soon as you try and carry so much speed through and get close to the car in front, your car will go out of shape because of the dirty air. So that often does lead to difficulties there. And once you run wide there, the curbs are quite big, and if you hit those, then you can be really in trouble.
And the gravel is very large and very welcoming and very dusty. Yes, it certainly does. Very magnetic, as we saw in qualifying. But as you say, there is a big long straight after that. It's about 2/3 the length of the front straight, well, half the length of the front straight. But again, it does potentially give you the opportunity, if you can really slingshot through there and take somebody by surprise, or if they make a mistake even, if they get in a little fast and come out slow onto the straight, it can help you set up for the next corner. And at the moment now, I think that's where most of these little battles are going to go. This one, 2nd and 3rd between Leinders and Wilson, and certainly the one 6th and 7th between Pizzonia and Webber. The drivers behind will now sit there, concentrate on their racing line and wait for a mistake.
The Pizzonia-Webber one is an interesting one, because although they're in different teams, they're still teammates. They both run out of the same unit really in Norfolk by David Sears' outfit. One's a Petrobras team and one's a Supernova team, but effectively they're teammates. They share motorhomes, so they'll be slightly more careful than they would be with other drivers who are not from the same team, although they're not directly teammates. Mr. Sears would still go bananas if they took each other off, so you've got to be a bit careful.
Well, of course, David, very careful to differentiate and to isolate those two teams, not from each other, but in the public awareness as not being 4 cars, 2 sponsored by one sponsor sort of set up and 2 by somebody else. So, I mean, he's very aware that Petrobras want their team to be seen as a group of individuals, but as you say, there is certainly a very close kinship between Supernova and the Petrobras drivers, I'm sure. Justin Wilson just cleaning off his visor there. He's been eating the dirt coming out of the back of Baz Leinders' car, and in these early stages, of course, everything topped up to the brim, the oil tanks, the water and everything else, so he's probably got a little bit of grime and filth on his visor. And onto that will be stuck some of the sand that the Formula 1 cars didn't manage to blow away in qualifying. Webber, Friesacher, Pantano, Bourdais, no changes at all then in the top 10. All the real battling, it seems at the moment, is going on way down the order. Yeah, well, it's always a difficult call, I think, for a director, as you want to be there if the leader drops it off the road or if somebody takes 3rd or 4th place, and in the end the racing tends to be down where the drivers are more similarly paced, or perhaps where guys like Dan Manning, who have been quicker, are trying to fight their way up through the traffic. Welcome back to Barcelona, and this is Gabriele Lancieri, the Durango driver, just exiting the pits. And while we were away on commercial, he dived in very quickly, and a very, very short stop indeed. Gareth Rees probably, I've got a puncture, no you haven't, get on with it.
Perhaps he's checking the half-time football scores.
Yes, Sunderland 0, I think, would be the first line of any of those. So Tomáš Enge still leading then from Baz Leinders, no change in the top half dozen. Justin Wilson now 8/10 of a second back in 3rd place, giving his tyres a little bit of a break, I would imagine. In 4th place, Meyer Haberfeld from David Saelens, Antônio Pizzonia, and then Mark Webber. Second in the championship points is 7th from Patrick Friesacher, Giorgio Pantano and Sébastien Bourdais. And Tomáš Enge driving the neatest race of his life, probably ever, I should think, at the moment, although driving the Porsche in the driving rain and the snowstorms at the Czech Republic track of Brno a couple of weeks ago, he was probably trying to be as neat and tidy there as he could, just the weather predicated against that, but he's doing a nice, neat job out front. And I think perhaps the fact that he's not driving away from them indicates that he is doing something other than that he would normally do. I mean, he wasn't quicker than Wilson, sliding a little bit there, but he was quick enough ahead of Baz Leinders, I think, in qualifying to be pulling out more than this kind of a gap after a dozen laps.
Oh, yeah, I think the fact that it's not Justin Wilson behind him has let him relax a little bit. I think he knows he's a good half-second lap quicker, or he wasn't qualifying, half-second lap quicker than Leinders. And obviously Justin Wilson was much closer to him. The fact is he's got a buffer of Leinders and he's not looking too worried by him. I think he tried to pull away the first 5 or 6 laps and wasn't able to do so as much as he'd like to, and he's happy now just to hold him at arm's length, look after the tyres, look after the car, and just pace himself on their pace, just keep himself away. No need to sort of get your head down and push too hard and risk throwing it off or damaging tyres or whatever.
No, I think exactly right. He's just counting down the laps, which seems like a bizarre thing to say, but he's certainly not trying to destroy the opposition by blinding off into the distance or anything else. And I'm not entirely sure I disagree with that as a way of going through the race either.
No, I mean, sometimes driving, I mean, like, when I do distant pass led races, I can occasionally I would try and just nail it the first 5 or 6 laps, and you gauge how much quicker or not you are than the other cars. If you are, keep it up and build a big gap as you can, and then relax. If you're not, if they're sort of coming and going, the gap's going up and down, just sit tight and just get into a nice comfortable mode, comfortable rhythm, and keep them at arm's length, far enough away they can't make a silly lunge and have you off. And just be comfortable. That's what I used to try and do. I think that's what he's done in this case.
Well, we're seeing the leaders now starting to catch Lancieri in the Durango car. The Durango team, of course, one of those associated with a Formula 1 team. They've got the Benetton Junior team tag this season, and having been into the pits, he was obviously, well, he wasn't entirely off the pace. He was actually in the battle down in 22nd place behind Jamie Malo, his teammate. In fact, they were fighting each other for position earlier on. But obviously he wasn't going as quickly as he'd have liked and pulled into the pits. Now he's ahead of them, and that possibly might offer some chance for Baz Leinders, and then again for Justin Wilson to close on the car ahead and make a decisive move if they catch the back marker in the wrong place. And I think at the moment that's what it's going to take, because none of the top 3 are looking like doing anything to each other at the moment. Leinders sliding there as well, so the cars are still obviously struggling a little bit in terms of grip.
Yeah, well, that's just the nature of the car, really. I mean, you're never going to get a 3000 car nailed. And that corner there where we saw them get sideways, both corners we see them get sideways badly now, is corners where it's quite tight on the entry and you're hard on the power. It's quite bumpy on the exit, so the car is struggling to get the traction, get the power down. And it just is a natural, even on new tyres, you tend to get a little bit out of shape there.
And even though cars have been driving on this track for 2 days now, you still see, as you did there, as they go along, just a little bow wave of dust coming up off the track, and so that's all part of it as well. There just isn't a huge amount of grip in this Barcelona circuit. Now this is the battle, as you see, for 10th place. Sébastien Bourdais in the Dams car, and Antônio Garcia just fighting it there under braking. And this is 10th and 11th places, just about 0.3 of a second apart. Bourdais, of course, last year on the outside front row of the race at Monaco, which David Saelens started from pole before they had an unfortunate coming together. Bourdais got away quicker and had his nose into the corner when Saelens arrived under heavy braking, and that was the end of the 2 of them. And that was as close as Bourdais has come to winning a race at the moment.
He had a good year last year. I thought for a rookie year he was very quick on quite a few occasions. Never actually peaked to go into a win, but he always looked strong. And I think the fact this year that his deal with the Prost team fell apart at such a late stage put him into bother. And by the time he got a deal together to go with Dams, he would know, isn't he? I think to go with Dams, he missed a lot of pre-season testing, and it was a new team, new mechanics, a whole new setup to learn. So that set him back, I think. Had he stayed with the team he was with last year, he'd be more of a front runner.
I would think very much so. You need that kind of continuity, and again, that's probably something that's helped Justin Wilson and the Nordic team as well, a mutual thing where they have got a year's experience together, and his engineers know exactly what he likes, and he knows exactly how to tell them how to get it. And Tomáš Enge coming into that obviously is slightly the new boy in the team. However, I think he's pretty much benefiting from all of that. It seems to me that Justin's not the sort of guy that keeps his setup cards very close to his chest, and if Enge's guys want to know why his car's going a lot quicker, then I think he'll probably end up telling them.
Yeah, I think generally, I think Derek Moore probably wouldn't stand for that anyway. I think he would probably, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure he would encourage the drivers to be open. I don't know how the setup works. It's different. It's different when both drivers are bringing their own finance, and effectively they are 2 teams within a team. Although they're teammates, they are still separate entities. In a situation here where it appears that Coca-Cola are paying the bills, I don't know for sure that they are, but they appear to be putting quite a bit in. then I think the team have more say in how the whole thing operates, and they can say to the drivers, look, you can't keep stuff to yourself, you know, it's not the done thing. So I think that's their situation.
Well, Coca-Cola clearly very happy with their pairing at the moment. They had Tomáš Enge, as I said, racing in the GTs at Brno, and both of these drivers will be racing in Magny-Cours on Monday and Tuesday. And I stand to be corrected, but I think that will be the first time Justin's ever raced with anything at all over his head, other than a dark, wet sky, obviously, from Britain. So that would be quite interesting, see how he adapts from single seaters, which have been his career so far, to driving a Porsche GT car. And again, Coca-Cola sponsoring that particular team, and as a result bringing their two drivers in, so clearly they are having a fairly major input into the Nordic racing team at the moment. Tomáš Enge leading in Barcelona. Further back, the Dams car coming under attack from Nicola Filiberti, and I'm not quite sure what position they were squabbling over.
12th.
That was 14th, yeah, 13th and 14th. And Filiberti has now got ahead of Derek Hill.
Justin's dropped back quite a bit there.
Well, Wilson was 1.3 behind Leinders at the line last time. And as you say, he is dropping back a little more with... Oh, in fact, he's dropping back quite a lot more there. That long shot, it took a long while, and he didn't appear at all. In fact, he has dropped right back.
Let's hope it's a one-off mistake he's made rather than a...
Well, he's gone from 1.3 to 1.8 back on the last lap, so he's dropped half a second. He didn't seem to be particularly in strife coming out of the final turn. How strange. Well, we'll wait to see how that one develops. Still in third place and still 2.5 seconds ahead of Mario Haberfeld. And, ooh, what's he picked up on his tyre?
It's his second stop in about 5 laps. So.
Yeah. Well, there goes our hope of an interesting tripping over back marker style overtaking manoeuvre then, as Lancieri comes into the pits.
Oh.
They dealt with him.
Is that another 10-second penalty, or...? Nobody went to the car, did they?
No, nobody went to the car at all. Not quite sure what on earth was going on there. We'll wait and see if we get any news up from the pits.
Unless he was speeding in the pit lane on his previous stop or something.
That's entirely possible. Race leader Tomáš Enge just 0.7 of a second ahead of Bas Leinders at the line, whereas it was 1.2 the previous lap. So in addition perhaps to Justin not quite being as quick on the previous lap, then definitely Bas Leinders was pushing a lot harder, and I think we're now seeing him with some 17 laps into the 35-lap race distance. We're right about the midpoint, and he's now perhaps feeling his car's a little happier as the fuel load is burning off and having a bit of a concerted effort before they start to run out of tyres.
Yeah, he's going to be in a slightly difficult situation, and that this is his best position for a long, long time, as you said before the race. And while second place is a very good result, given the time since his last good result, a win is also attractive. So, but the temptation is there just to sit on what he's got and take that.
I would, yes, certainly with no points on the board at all this year, it would be very tempting indeed to settle for second, but then not until I think he's convinced himself he's had a good enough go for the lead. And I don't think Justin Wilson will be settling for third place yet either, because he's not really had even a look at trying to go for second place. So,
but having said that, he's got to look at the bigger picture, Justin. I mean, he's leading the championship, and a third place is a third place, particularly if Webber, who's currently 7th,
still in 7th place, doesn't score.
That could be make all the difference at the end of the season. So he's got to be careful.
Exactly, he will be thinking very much of the bigger picture as well. From the first corner, I'm sure he'll have been thinking very much of the bigger picture. And even if Enge wins this, Enge at the moment with the chance to move on to 14 points in the championship, Justin already on 11, and he will then move on to 15 points. So he'll still have a 1-point lead if they finish as they do here, which is, I'm sorry, Justin, rather counting chickens and probably the Murray Walker curse right there. But so at the moment, he's not in danger of losing his championship lead, either to Mark Webber or indeed to his own teammate. And for the two Nordic boys to leave here first and second in the points, I can't imagine how happy Derek and Chris Mower were after the race at Brazil, but their joy would know no bounds, I'm sure, to be able to be in that position with the second win from 3 starts, another third place, and first and second in the championship, almost beyond any sort of pre-season hopes.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they like you said before, their form in the past has been patchy as a team. I think they have won races, but not on a consistent basis. So if they can keep it up there, that'd be very impressive and make a nice, refreshing change as well.
Certainly worked good to see somebody else coming to the fore. No disrespect to anybody working out of Thetford in Norfolk, but it's nice to see somebody else coming in and upsetting the apple cart occasionally. Mark Webber, we said, in 7th place, still just 0.7 of a second behind Antônio Pizzonia. In fact, 0.6 on the end of the previous lap. So he's there or thereabouts. I mean, he's close enough to not have given up, certainly, and I don't think he'll give up until they're in Parc Fermé, but still not actually close enough really to have much of a shout at the moment. The top 4 though are really driving away from everybody else. Mario Haberfeld in 4th place, you can see, is 2 seconds behind Justin Wilson in 3rd. There they go, all 4 of them. But from 4th to 5th, it's a 7.5 second gap back to David Saelens. And don't forget that the Belgian driver was on the 2nd row of the grid. Now here we can see Antônio Pizzonia and Mark Webber. There is Pizzonia, there is Webber, and there is Friesacher, and right in front of Pizzonia is David Saelens. So this is the next group, and they are just 1.3 seconds covering all 4 of them, according to... No, 2.3 seconds covering all 4 of them. So they're all very close together, but at the moment, again, as with the leaders early on, just nobody quite close enough to do anything about anybody.
No, unfortunately, it's symptomatic of the modern racing car and modern racing circuit, isn't it? There's very few cars or single-seater cars and racing circuits that lend themselves to gripping races anymore, unfortunately. Formula Ford is the best stuff. And once you get into wings, the wing's the problem. Like I said before, with the aerodynamic issue, it really doesn't lend itself to close racing and overtaking, more importantly.
Well, Mark Webber's car in qualifying, of course, not the best that it could have been after being very hurriedly rebuilt from his first session crash. And I'm sure whatever it was, he just took it by the scruff of the neck and hauled it around for 3 or 4 laps to try desperately and set something approaching a decent time. And I have to say, to improve in the second session from 13th to 11th, as everybody else was going quicker as well, shows not only his commitment, but also the pretty much spot-on setup that it might well have had. However, in the race here, Friesacher is all over the back of him in a way that he can't quite manage at the moment to Pizzonia. But a big look up there from Pizzonia, and I think that possibly is a legacy of the fact that he was chasing hard to try and get onto the tail of David Saelens in the black Dams machine.
Pizzonia had a bit of an incident during the week, apparently, in qualifying, when the car fell off the jacks in the pits, and two mechanics were underneath the car, and the car actually landed on them. One of them's broken a rib, and the other escaped with just a sore wrist, apparently. But that could have been an awful lot worse, so that was unfortunate for them.
Scary moment for the mechanics, definitely, to be lying underneath it and have the thing come down. All right, there, you know, it's not a road car, but
it's not a go-kart either, is it?
Exactly. The injuries show that it's not the lightest thing in the world. So our best wishes to both of them. I'm sure that they will be feeling very stiff and sore for the next few weeks. And Webber also, of course, racing with that broken rib, and that will still not be healed as well. So I'm sure under his race suit he is still wearing an awful lot of tape. And these races, well, mercifully a few laps shorter than they were in previous years, but still, it's all tough physical stuff. And towards the end of the race, no matter what your fitness, I'm sure that, especially if you're in a frustrating position where you can't actually seem to make much progress, I'm sure that becomes more and more of a situation where it preys on your mind. So Webber in this battle, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th. Thomas Enge leading still from Bas Leinders and Justin Wilson. Welcome back to Barcelona. Eurosport covering live the 3rd race in the FIA Formula 3000 Championship. And still the Nordic Racing Coca-Cola entry of Thomas Enge leading, as he has done since the first corner. Started on the outside of the front row of the grid. And there is the man that was on pole position, Justin Wilson, winner in Interlagos of the first race of the championship, and still the championship leader after 2 rounds. And that singleton point from 6th position at Imola is what keeps him ahead of Mark Webber in the standings. Into the pits for the 3rd time comes Gabriele Lancieri, obviously stopping for directions again, lost his way on the way around the track. I really can't tell. He is talking on the radio, isn't he? Definitely to the team, and he has done each time he's stopped. And they're all talking back to him. And whatever it is about the car that he doesn't like, they don't seem actually to have touched it at any stage. So, very bizarre. I know 2 years ago when Justin was driving for Astra Mega, I remember particularly at Monaco when he'd had an incident and had gone off and dropped out of the race. He came back into the pits and they put a new nose on the car and then spent the rest of the race going in and out. He made 2 or 3 further pit stops, I think, changing things with the team and going back out onto the track, finding out how it worked and really treating it as a learning session, as a, you know, staying out of the way obviously as much as you can, but really trying to do as many laps as he possibly could around Monaco to get to grips with the car on the street track for his first time in his life. And that was, for a rookie, a very, very sensible thing to be doing. And whatever the problem with the car for Lancieri, obviously he's bailed out now, and I think perhaps that might be the end of it, but doing as many laps as possible is never a bad thing. Didn't look very happy,
Doesn't look very happy, no.
No, not at all. I think there was a degree of verbal finger-pointing going on there. Still no problems, it seems, either for Tomáš Enge or Justin Wilson. Not quite sure why Justin didn't get the car hooked up at the start. It may just be as simple as that. He didn't really get the traction right at the start, but Enge certainly did. Took away no problems at all.
Leinders has dropped right back from...
He has indeed, and that is... that's right back at the back, isn't it? That is Antônio Garcia picking up a place, and that puts Garcia now up into 11th spot as he goes past Sébastien Bourdais finally. No swibbing at it, hammer and tongs.
He's local boy, isn't he? Spaniard, so...
Yes, indeed.
Extra impetus.
Well, having seen him chatting his way through our links in the introductory programme as our InVision presenter, the local boy doing a good job behind the wheel, and good enough, I'm afraid, to prevent me from taking over his job next weekend. Yes, I'd have trouble driving a wheelbarrow, never mind one of these things. So
just because you're too tall, Martin, obviously.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's why I have to have convertible cars, so I've got somewhere to put my head. And this is the reason, the Dams car running wide in the dirt, and I would think probably under sustained pressure from Garcia. Garcia is a very tigerish little driver, very aggressive young man, and in the end, Sébastien Bourdais couldn't quite keep it all together. So 10th place now for Garcia, still 4 away from the points though, and Mark Webber, the 2nd place man in the championship, is still 1 tantalising passing manoeuvre away from the point. Well, David Saelens, incidentally, in 5th place is still right ahead of Antonio Pizzonia, who is in the position to gain the last point. They're now nearly 10 seconds behind the lead quartet, or the slowest of the lead quartet, 16 seconds behind race leader Tomáš Enge. So David Saelens acting as a very effective stopper in the midfield bottle. Tomáš Enge now easing away from Bas Leinders by 2.5 seconds, and signs now that he's starting to push a little harder. I think the car's sliding a little bit more and moving around a fraction more.
Yeah, I mean, his last lap was a couple of things quicker than he has been doing. And more importantly, Leinders, the lap before, did a lap in a 38, which was about 5 or 6 tenths slower than he has been doing as well. So he obviously made a mistake somewhere, and that's why he's dropped back quite such a chunk in a short time.
And dropping back towards Justin Wilson, of course, who will desperately be hoping to try and find some way past him, maybe even into the closing stages. Again, Wilson, I think, has earned himself rightfully a reputation the last 2 seasons as a man who does know an overtaking opportunity when he even half glimpses one out of the corner of his eye. He's made some very aggressive passing manoeuvres. He's a demon at race restarts. In fact, he must be praying for a safety car situation of some kind so he can get right up behind Leinders. But at the moment, I think it is going to take something like that, because he's not able to really stay in contact. Now, there is Pizzonia locking up again. Webber right there, behind him and Friesacher, and ahead of Pizzonia. The black car is the European Minardi team car this year, not European Arrows as they were last year, of Saelens. That's 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th. two of these drivers potentially in possession of the point, the other two potentially not yet. And Friesacher is really being a complete terrier to Mark Webber. He absolutely won't let go. He's been about a third of a second behind him all the way through, which must be destroying his car's handling and his tyres as well. And he's just nailed right up behind him. No sort of dropping back and breathing at all.
That's a good example of consistent driving from all these four. I mean, they've been nose to tail for the entire race so far. No major mistakes have been made. And no one's really had the chance to get past the car in front because they've been driving so consistently.
Well, of course, there is the frustration for all of them. Nobody's making a mistake, and so as a result, no chances opening up. And Saelens in fifth place, as I said, not even remotely able to stay with the pace of the leaders. Last time round, Enge 1:37.7. Saelens is doing 1:38.3, so they're 5 seconds, 5/10, 6/10 of a second off the pace on a lap-by-lap basis. And Friesacher really is looking everywhere around Mark Webber at the moment. We've seen Pizzonia lock up several times behind Saelens. I think there is a degree of frustration in the two trailing drivers in this little pair of duos. Interesting to see Pizzonia on the straight going way off the racing line and looking, even though he was nowhere near a potential overtaking position, looking down the inside still. Maybe he's cleaning up the line a little bit, a la Schumacher, to try and make sure that there is grip if he needs it there. I mean, there's certainly no reason not to be doing little things like that in preparation. Does slightly show your hand a bit, I suppose, but there you go.
Yeah, main thing is just to apply the pressure, just to keep yourself in the mirrors, keep that yellow nose cone in his peripheral vision, in Mark's peripheral vision, and hope that he feels the pressure.
And I'm sure he is noticing the pressure. Pizzonia still very close to Saelens, just as Friesacher is to Webber. 0.47, just a bit further back. He's dropped perhaps a tenth of a second off that time round. Webber, I think, more likely as the race draws on to suffer increasingly from the attentions of Friesacher than he is to be able to do anything much about Pizzonia. And what he mustn't do is allow Friesacher to get past, because as sure as eggs are eggs, the moment he does that, he'll then see Pizzonia take himself out, and the point will be Friesacher's and not Webber's. So, if Friesacher comes by, my prediction will be that Pizzonia will make a lunge on Saelens, and one or the other of them will not survive it.
Yeah, it's worth if you haven't got the speed, which doesn't look like Mark has today, it's just worth holding station and wait for that to happen, wait for that mistake to happen.
And again, you can see how hard they're all pushing, can't you? The trio of them, all three locking up there. And only Friesacher keeping the braking smooth and even between the front wheels.
And he benefited because he pulled right in on Webber.
Certainly did, and as they come round again through these last two right-handers, he's still pretty close there. Not quite close enough yet to really be making a move, but by the end of the straight he will be increasingly threatening. 5 to go, so if there is a time for really hanging it all out, then we are fast approaching that time. And there's really not an awful lot of point in making rear guard actions. You've got to now start in the last 5 laps really looking ahead of yourself. Justin Wilson 1.3 behind Baz Leinders, and that, I'm afraid, I would say, Gareth, from the spectator's armchair, is a done and dusted deal. I don't think he's going to get back from there, is he?
I wouldn't say so, no, not without a bit of assistance from a Leinders mistake or something like that, which I can't see happening. So no, I think he's going to have to be happy with third place this afternoon, which he won't be.
Which he will be, because he will leave as championship leader.
Yeah, but he having sat on pole, when you always expect to improve on a position you start from. So if you start second, you expect to win. If you start on pole, you certainly expect to win. You don't expect to come away with a third place. So he'll be annoyed with himself for that. But he's driven well, and he's leading the championship still. So
well, yes, certainly mixed feelings, I'm sure. Yes, to be sitting on pole ahead of your teammate and not to win the race will be a big disappointment.
Yeah, and the fact that his teammate has beaten him as well will be a bit hard to take.
Absolutely. Well, not quite as hard as if Mark Webber had run away with the race, but still pretty tough. Thomas Enge leads. There's Wilson in third. The gap opening up again as Thomas Enge once more just eases 0.2 of a second exactly to the 1,000th away from Bas Leinders on that last lap. And Justin Wilson in third place, 4.2 behind the leader, 1.3 behind Leinders. And then some further now, only 3.5 seconds back actually, is Mario Haberfeld. But behind him, it's another 7-second gap to David Saelens, who leads that little gang of four. Saelens, Pizzonia, Webber and Friesacher. And that's how they are, Saelens and Pizzonia and Webber and Friesacher. And of the four, Friesacher has my money now to make a move, because he is the one who has looked most aggressive of all in these last few laps. And very fast approaching the end of the race. Well, the official paperwork, or semi-official paperwork I have, is suggesting 35 laps of the race distance. However, 31 seems to be the mathematics that the timing and scoring is working on. Whatever, I'm sure the teams and particularly the drivers are very well aware of what remains to be done. And in this position now, Thomas Enge, aiming towards his maiden Formula 3000 victory. Oh, I tell a lie, don't I?
Yes, you do.
I do. His maiden dry Formula 3000 victory. I'll qualify that. Having won last year in a most bizarre wet-dry race in Germany, looking for his first lights-to-flag victory here. Well, again, let's have a look. Look at the top of the picture. Is it going to be Friesacher? No, they're just showing us everybody locking their wheels up. Thought perhaps that Friesacher might have just had a little jink out there and a lunge down the inside of Webber.
So the problem is those two corners, end of the pit straight and the end of that straight, the entries are quite quick. To really help on overtaking, you need to have a nice slow entry to the corner, and both those are quite, well, not quick, but they're medium speed entries, which, again, that doesn't lend itself to a lunge at the inside.
What you need is a nice tight corner with plenty of opening up afterwards, so you can take advantage of it. In fact, the end of the straight at Rio is a pretty good example of a very fast straight into a very tight corner.
Yeah, something like that would be spot on.
Yeah. So they need to redraw their map, courtesy of us here at Eurosport, and then suddenly, hey presto, Barcelona will be overtaking City, as opposed to the moment where it's starting to gain a sort of reputation much like the Hungaroring has. So there's a bit of a follow-my-leader track, and this group here, as well as the lead trio, have proved exactly that. 4, 5, or 5, 6, 7 and 8, unable to do anything at all about any of the drivers ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, clearly these four are pretty evenly matched on pace. I think, like you said, Pizzonia and Friesacher have an edge. Particularly Friesacher seems determined to do something about it, but they are very evenly matched and lapping all an attempt for each other, really. So those two factors together make for processional performance.
Well, Friesacher again, half having a look, but only half isn't going to get him anywhere. Mark Webber's not going to say, oh, sorry, yes, was I holding you up? And certainly not at this stage of the race. So Friesacher is going to have to be very, very determined indeed to unseat the Australian. It's now going to be a matter of pride not to be passed. No points, or points notwithstanding, Webber will not be passed by Friesacher unless he can avoid it, or if he can avoid it. So Friesacher, if he wants to get by and finish in 7th as opposed to 8th, is really going to have to push hard. Notice how his head was bobbling around there in the turbulent airstream, whereas Mark Webber seemed to be fairly comfortable, just far enough behind Pizzonia not to be disturbed by that. And Enge not disturbed by anything at all, it seems, in this race. And sowed the seeds of his victory, really, in the first 100 metres or so. Nearly hit the back of Justin Wilson's car as he came off the right-hand side of the grid. Cut behind Wilson to the outside line, getting the run down the outside. Wilson holding on the inside under braking into the first corner, but on the dusty part of the track, it was really a losing game all the way. Thomas Enge moved into the middle of the road coming down to the first corner, and once he'd got the better of Wilson on the brakes, scrambled around the outside in the lead, and Wilson also losing out in the first corner, and ultimately I feel in the race to Bas Leinders, who managed to squeeze up inside him into second place. No contact or anything, so a good clean move by Leinders, taking advantage of the opportunity that presented itself, and that's absolutely crucial in these races. And as a result, he's still in second place, and that will be his best Formula 3000 result to date. Well, Enge, as we said, already a winner last year. Justin Wilson already a winner this. And this will be the second win for Nordic Racing in 3 races. And as we said again earlier, that will make Derek and his son Chris Mower, the principals of the team, very, very happy bunnies indeed. And the Coca-Cola sponsorship deal, I'm sure, will look even more like a good bet for whichever corporate heads at the Central European branch of Coca-Cola decided to go with the team. They dipped their toe in the water last year. They were impressed with the results that the team managed to get courtesy of Justin, and bringing Thomas Enge, one of their favoured men, on board seems to have doubled their chances of success quite nicely.
No, it's a good, nice little coup for the team, that. I mean, to get any sponsor is obviously welcome, but to get a blue chip company like that on board is very difficult in 3000, because 3000 doesn't get as much publicity as it might do. Certainly not a patch on Formula 1.
Well, hopefully all across Eastern Europe, viewers sitting, despite the sunny weather, watching the race here live on Eurosport and watching the Czech Thomas Enge heading towards the checkered flag for the second time in his Formula 3000 career. Third last time out at Imola, top step of the podium for the Czech. This time he wins in Barcelona. Bas Leinders taking a well-deserved second place, and Justin Wilson, I'm sure, only disappointed now to be in third. Fourth, Mario Haberfeld. Fifth will be David Saelens. And sixth, Antônio Pizzonia takes the final point. Mark Webber holding off Patrick Friesacher for 7th and 8th place all the way to the line. And, well, Thomas Enge already loosening the seatbelts, ready to get out of the car. And you saw Derek Mower on the radio there saying well done, and well done indeed to Thomas Enge. And here are 3 of the battling quartet who enlivened the positions 5 down to 8 for most of the race for the spectators. 32 laps of unadulterated front running from Thomas Enge, and having won in a very, very well-judged gamble at the Nürburgring, at Hockenheim indeed, last year, in a wet race that turned out to be dry for the now defunct McLaren Junior team. Thomas Enge doing a very good job of taking the lead into the first corner here at Barcelona, and essentially, Gareth, not to try and downplay it too much, cruising to the flag.
Yeah, I mean, he was never under threat, was he? I mean, Leinders got close to him in the middle section for about 3 laps. But Enge just upped the pace slightly, and Leinders made a slight mistake and dropped right back in the space of 1 or 2 laps. And he was very comfortable.
Very comfortable indeed. Opened up a second or so advantage and didn't overstress his tyres, kept it alive all the way to the end. Thomas Enge, the winner then, heads them back round to Parc Fermé, and again the Coca-Cola Nordic team on the podium, on the top step and on the 3rd step of the podium as well. Justin Wilson takes his first 3rd place of the year. He's now had a win, a 6th and a 3rd. So yo-yoing up and down, but getting points all the time and showing as a front runner all the time as well. And Antônio Pizzonia, who I'm sure would have hoped to have fared well this season as he came in as the British Formula 3 champion, I think doing a pretty reasonable job as well. 6th position here, so gains himself the point for that. And as we speculated earlier on, Justin Wilson, mixed feelings I'm sure. Disappointed to have lost the race, as I'm certain he will have felt he did. However, leading the championship by 1 point, he came here and he goes away leading the championship as well by 1 point. And this time not from Mark Webber, but from his teammate Thomas Enge. So Nordic Racing, and again, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I would like to place very good money on the fact that this is the first time they have been 1st and 2nd in the Formula 3000 Championship. Our congratulations go to Justin, to Thomas, and definitely to Chris and Derek Mower as well. Very good job indeed all weekend for both cars. Well engineered and well driven. Bas Leinders, the only one to spoil what would have been a perfect podium for them, 1st and 2nd. And I have to say, on their current form, I wouldn't like to put too much of a gamble against that happening at some stage during the year. Mario Haberfeld getting 3 points, David Saelens 2, Antônio Pizzonia the last point. Webber losing out, but showing again that he can race, and he is not bowed by adversity. As I said in qualifying, you can take the boy out of Australia, but it's hard to take the Australia out of the boy. Gritty determination and the honesty that he showed after, quite frankly, by his own admission, making a mistake, dropping the car off the road in qualifying. Well, the Supernova team did a very good job to get the car back together, and Webber did his very best to repay them. Ultimately unsuccessful in terms of points, but there you go. Tomáš Enge kisses his car as well he might, having won here in Barcelona in comfortable fashion. Justin Wilson there, the first man to offer his thanks, or his congratulations rather, David Saelens as well. And congratulations also being proffered there by David Saelens. Mark Webber on the weighing scales doesn't look half as happy as perhaps he might have hoped to be after Imola. And a weekend, hopefully for the Aussie, not to be repeated. His avowed intention is to win the championship this year. Nothing else will do for him. And he will have to avoid such slip-ups. But it is possible to have the odd bad weekend and win the championship, Gareth, as we've seen so often in this series. It's not just two drivers that share the wins, it tends to get shared out a little bit more, and so points get more evenly spread out between up to half a dozen front runners in the early part of the season, so you can survive the odd glitch like this weekend.
Yeah, it's only one race out of 12, so no reason to panic yet, but this season has got good depth in quantity, as people like Pizzonia and Saelens, Friesacher, all good drivers, but particularly Enge and Wilson look really strong. I think those two plus Webber are going to make it a good championship this year.
Yep, I think that we may well see the three of those taking the lion's share of the wins. But again, as you say, not just 10 races this year, 12 races. I mean, we are at the stage now, 3 races in, where you would start to become a little worried in previous years. But again, 9 more races to go. So again, that helps with the lottery that qualifying can occasionally turn into. And it does help negate the effect of a poor weekend. No drop scores, of course, everything counts, but still, it does mean that everything is not lost. And I'm sure among other facets of Coca-Cola's involvement, that particular facet is very well appreciated by the mechanics at the Nordic Racing team. The Czech national anthem rings out across the Barcelona track as Tomáš Enge receives the award for winning here the 3rd round of the FIA Formula 3000 Championship. And a very convincing victory it was. Took the lead at the first corner, and from there on never looked back, barely even glanced in his mirrors, I would think. Bas Leinders delighted to have started on the 2nd row of the grid. He said his best qualifying position since a Formula 3 race in Germany in 1998, and that's his best senior category racing result of his career. Justin Wilson in 3rd place will undoubtedly be disappointed not to have won the race, but for the last 15 laps will have commiserated with himself and said, don't worry, you're still the championship leader. There are 9 races to go still. Next one will be at Spielberg, which was in Austria last time I looked, and not in Switzerland. The support to the Austrian Grand Prix, May the 12th. Join me and Gareth Rees for that one. Until then, from us, it's goodbye.